Hi guys, doing today? Welcome to my locker room video for the Seattle, no, excuse me, I am the Seattle Sylveons. It is the Sydney Sylveons. There's a lot of alliteration going on here with a lot of S's, and that made it a little confusing there. Go figure I'd mess up that first part. But we're team building for the Sylveons, and let me say, out of the many teams that I've built for so far, this is actually one of the harder ones to build for because there's a lot of defensive mons here, and Chansey, the fact that Chansey is here alone is causing me a lot of problems. The combination of Chansey, I would say Chandelure, and Gliscor are, I don't have the mons necessary to immediately break them all with one thing, so I think the opportunity I'm going to get here is by using, I'm going to have to get some kind of element of surprise on my opponent in order to get the drop on him and hopefully squeak out a win, which is going to be pretty unfortunate because I'm going to have to pull something else off for week 5, and I do play them again 2 weeks later. I think this is our regional conference, and then week 5 is an actual game, so I think I will be playing these guys probably... Oh, geez, like, how many times? Like, two or three times. It's just going to be a little interesting that I'm having this much trouble on go-around number 1, and I'm going to have to come up with stuff for, like, maybe 2 or 3 more. So that's going to be just a blast. Just a blast. But for this first time around, I do want to shine spotlight on a few mons here, and I literally just have the Talonflame as a placeholder because it doesn't let you do anything there, and then extra random Zapdos here. I think that's the one I used in week 2. It's not the one I'll be using in week 3. So... to start things off, looking at my opponent's team, it's basically just Fat with Mawile and Victini, which is already pretty scary in itself. But the way we deal with Fat, how I'm thinking right off the bat, is Medicham. Now, I've run a couple of calcs and stuff, and as rewarding as High Jump Kick is on the majority of my opponent's team, I can't really mess around with the possibility of Protect on random mons, as well as being a staple on normal mons, like Gliscor and Chansey. Those very commonly run Protect, and, there'd definitely be a justification for there to happen there. Umbreon also runs Protect, in combination with Wish. If my opponent is savvy enough with Hex and is able to get a Wish Chansey going on, Wish Protect could be a thing. Gliscor just very commonly runs Sub Protect. So I don't want to run High Jump Kick despite the fact that it could net me a lot of kills. That's also not to say that a bunch of other mons couldn't run it too. So it's a little bit too much of a threat for Medicham to run. I would much rather get safe, secure damage, especially if I get Toxic or something along those lines. That'll kind of ease any potential Stealth Rock switch-ins as well. It does good meaty damage, and it's going to be chip ultimately for other mons to come out and shine. Zen Headbutt, on the other hand, is still my very reliable Psychic Stab. I think being... How much base power is friggin' Zen Headbutt anyway? Let me take a look. That's 80. 80 base power, 90 accuracy, and a chance to flinch. A lot of the stuff is slower, so the odds to flinch are going to be pretty decent. Not to say that I would normally rely on a flinch, but if I got it, I certainly would not complain. So, I have Fake Out here specifically for Victini, for Jolteon, to outpace priority moves such as Sucker Punch, and I think that's really... So yeah, Sucker Punch on... Mawile, and then any priority coming out of Lightbird, I think is just kind of good to have that kind of priority there. Ice Punch is purely for Gliscor. It will be nice to get it off, and let me see. On Mesprit, if it tries to come in and resist the Drain Punch or the Zen Headbutt, that'll be okay too. Super effective damage on Xatu. I'm pretty sure it OHKOs non-defensive variants, but I'm also slower than non-defensive variants, I should say, so that would only happen on a switch is what I'm thinking. But given the fact that I am fighting and Psychic, the temptation to actually go into Xatu hard might be there, but Ice Punch is a thing to consider my opponent's behalf, so it could be a little bit tricky for both of us to kind of decide whether or not that is going to be a valid play there, so to speak. So, I think that's enough talking about Medicham there. The other mon I'm really feeling in this matchup is Ferrothorn. Go figure, one of my free agents has been one of my more important mons that I've brought. I think I've brought it in nearly every single game, just because it is a backbone of a team that I have in mind. But I've actually gone full sassy with this one. Just straight up special defensive, lowered speed. I don't even think I have 31 speed. I gotta check that, or I need to have 0 in speed for this to be more effective. Because I think I can definitely go lower. But the physical attackers on my opponent's team, I will probably end up getting bopped by anyway. Mawile with Fire Fang will absolutely ruin me. Victini enough said. Gliscor can eventually chip away at me with Earthquake, but that's not to say I would necessarily stay in on it. If I could get a Leech Seed off before it's subbed, I would probably switch out anyways. Otherwise, I got no business staying in on Gliscor because it can Swords Dance in my face. I would want to scout and see what it wants to do there, of course. But I can take an unboosted hit from Gliscor, and the thing is since it has Earthquake, it's not going to be benefiting me to stay in since Iron Barbs doesn't get procced by it. So that's basically okay. So Mawile, Victini, and Gliscor, those are my main physical attackers right there. Umbreon with Foul Play does not really necessarily matter whatsoever. If I have to switch it in to do that, I will get a Leech Seed off while it wishes, that kind of thing. It's whatever. It's more about the special attackers that I'm worried about. Primarina, you know, I completely wall that for days, and I'm pretty sure I one-shot non-HP variants with an uninvested Power Whip, because it's just that, it's a pretty powerful move, and on top of that, I don't think Primarina's physical defense is really anything to write home about. What else do we have here? I take hits from Jolteon like crazy. There's going to have to be Rogue-ass HP fires going on here. Mesprit, I can take hits from that pretty well as well. I don't think it gets any natural fire moves outside of Hidden Power Fire. Xatu gets Heat Wave. Xatu will be a very popular switch into Ferrothorn, but I'm thinking that because I have the Gyro Ball, I can get off some meaty damage and try to chip away at it first and hopefully kill it off before I get Rocks up, which will help greatly against Chandelure, Victini. Let me think. Xatu itself, if I get him in outside of a Magic Bounce, I think those are the big three that it helps against, but rocks are always just still really nice to have, so that's why I got Ferrothorn here. I don't think that it could really be argued that this is a bad decision, so I'm going to kind of go ahead and just move on from there. Next mon I have here is a Choice Scarf Gengar. I was originally considering Specs, but looking at how well Scarf Victini does against my team, I need something to outpace the Victini as well. And you're probably wondering, why do you have Choice Scarf with Will-O-Wisp? I'm hoping at that point in the game, I will have dumped my Choice Scarf before I end up going against Mawile. Since if it ends up in a situation where it's Gengar versus Mawile, and it tries to Sucker Punch me as I Willow, it will fail, it will get burned, and then I can eventually just go for Shadow Ball until it dies. The ultimate thing is if I'm able to burn Mawile with Gengar, then I pretty much consider that a mission accomplished. And then if I get a trick off on a slower mon like Quagsire or Chansey, or Umbreon or Gliscor, the cool thing about tricking Gliscor is I don't care about Toxic Orb. So that's fine, and I could eventually dump that on something else too. I could put that on Umbreon if I really wanted to. But there's plenty of trickable mons, and I figure having one tricker / one thing that's going to be faster than Victini naturally is going to be pretty good in this matchup, and I figure Gengar's never really done me too much wrong. It didn't do too much in the previous game, but I think that's just the way I played it, not necessarily what I had in mind for it. So this is also what I have in mind for it. I just need to make sure I dump my item first, because if I Will-O-Wisp while I'm choiced, and he just Swords Dance on the switch, it literally just negates the Wisp, which will still put me in a bit of trouble. Mawile is just a really scary Mega in this matchup. But that's what I have there. Cool thing is since Mega Mawile does not have leftovers, the burn will actually be doing a little bit of damage per turn. It's not enough to bank on, but chip is chip. It helps out wherever you go. So, the other thing I have here, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Silvally before I talk about these last two mons that I have on that row. So, for this match, I've actually chosen a Z Heal Block Silvally. Now, what that's going to do, the important thing, is it's going to activate Heal Block regularly, but it's also going to get me +2 special attack. This is going to be pretty important against the Gliscor, against the Umbreon, against pretty much anything else that wants to Wish. If I go for Heal Block on Mesprit, I don't know if Healing Wish goes through. I'm not 100% on that. It might be blocked from using it, period. I would have to research that, because that is a possibility with Mesprit. But it does block Lefty's recovery. It does block Chansey from using Soft Boiled. I'm pretty sure it blocks Wish from just going off in the first place. I think it blocks most forms of recovery moves. I kind of want to look into that right now and see how useful this is going to be, because this was an idea. This is not a very well-researched idea, but I like the idea of being able to put Chansey in an unexpected corner, and all it can really do is Seismic Toss, as I just get off chip damage until it runs away to something else. So let me see. Heal Block on Bulbapedia. So, affected mons cannot use status moves that heal the user immediately. Wish, Lunar Dance, or Healing Wish. So it does block Wish, it does block Healing Wish. An affected mon has already selected one of these moves to use before being affected by Heal Block. It is prevented from using the move, so just like if he got taunted. If Pokemon cannot use any moves while selecting that move due to heal blocks, due to having no other PP, it will struggle. So it does block stuff in that instance. Affected Pokemon can still use HP draining moves. These moves will still inflict damage, but will not restore HP. Liquid Ooze is not affected by heal block. There's no poison types, so that's not something to worry about. Affected Pokemon cannot be healed by the effects of Wish, which cannot be used while affected by heal block or these moves. So if I switched in Sylveon on a Wish, and then I heal blocked the switch in, then it would not receive the Wish if the Umbreon was to get out of there. Let's see. Heal block can now be reflected with Magic Bounce, which is unfortunate. Gen 6 onwards, let's check it out. Affected Pokemon can no longer use HP draining moves except for Leech Seed. So that was in Gen 4 that I was talking about the HP draining moves like Giga Drain and stuff. So that will not work there. Can still use Grassy Terrain but cannot be affected by it. Affected Pokemon can still restore HP using the Z power effects of status Z moves. Heal block cannot prevent the Pokemon from being using or being healed by any Z move, including moves like Z Soft Boil and Z Heal Pulse. And then it says, if used by Psychium Z into Z Heal Block, the user's special attack raises 2 stages. So, information for you guys and for me. Heal Block pretty much blocks nearly every instance of healing that my opponent could have here. A poison Pokemon with Poison Heal that is affected by Heal Block is neither healed nor damaged. Gliscor maintains status quo, so it has no benefit to protecting. I'm now a +2 Sylveon with Stab, Tri-Attack, and Shadow. That Shadow Ball is literally there for Chandelure and for Mawile. I also do not want to reveal what type of Sylveon until the time is right, so rather than opt for coverage, I've opted for Parting Shot, which actually goes really well with one of my next mons coming up here, and I think we're actually going to go ahead and talk about that one now. So, this Zapdos is a very special Zapdos. This Zapdos actually has Baton Pass from Pokemon Gale, what is it, XD Gale of Darkness. It gets it via Purifying It, so it is perfectly allowed. I don't think I've actually EV'd this thing yet, because I haven't decided what I've wanted to do. No, I don't want to judge. I think I have to view Summary to make sure if this thing is EV'd or not. Or maybe it is. I think it is, now that I think about it. Okay, yeah, I remember. This thing has a very specific EV spread. So this thing has max HP, it has enough speed to outspeed Chandelure by 1 point, and then the rest goes into defense. So it outspeeds base 80s, which I think is Mesprit and Chandelure. I've got Discharge and Roost, Sub and Baton Pass. The idea is to set up a sub, because Zapdos is one of the last things you would expect to carry Sub and Baton Pass. With that in mind, what I would probably be doing is, as Chansey comes in to eventually take the Discharge or whatever, I could go for Sub, I could Baton Pass it out into my last Mon, which I have not talked about. But at that point, you know, I do have Roost, so I can keep doing it again, and then Discharge is literally just there for utility. If it's affected by Electric, which a few Mons are, I think there's a few that are immune in the form of Gliscor, Jolteon, and Quagsire. I'm not sure how many of them will show up to play, but the other 6 are prone to paralysis, so it's not a bad Mon to have around. I think the fact that it is kind of physically defensive, but kind of not, it's oriented that way. It complements Ferrothorn's special defensiveness a little bit better, I guess. But the idea is, with Zapdos, to Baton Pass into either Medicham, who will immediately start putting in quote-unquote the business, or to pass into my last Mon here, which is going to be Zygarde. Now, the thing that I notice about my opponent's team, which is actually very special, is there are no innate resists to 1,000 Arrows. There is Gliscor, which, you know, it takes neutral from it. I think Gliscor and Quagsire are probably going to be the main checks to the set, but if only one of them shows up, I just have to worry about that before I try to get this thing in. And the idea here is to get Coil up behind a sub as well as Dragon Dance, because that way I will just keep continually beefing up. Victini is no longer a threat unless it has Glaciate. I eventually win the 1v1 matchup versus Gliscor, and against Mega Mawile, I believe once I get 1 or 2 Dragon Dances in, it will just immediately get bopped. Now, the EV spread on this thing is also a little bit particular. It has, what is that? It has 404, it generates 101 subs, which is important versus Chansey. It means I can set up on it. It has the rest in attack. It has maxed out attack, it has enough for 101 subs, and it has enough speed. It just so happened to magically work out this way. I did not plan this way. This is pretty cool. But its speed creeps on Timid Primarina by 1 point. So if push really comes to shove and I get a sub, then I could potentially get a coil up on Primarina as it breaks my sub, and then eventually knock it out with 1,000 arrows is the main game plan we have going on for that. But I think my strategy for this game, if I had one game plan to go into this game with, it would be to set up sub with Zapdos, baton pass it to either Medicham or Zygarde, and immediately just start going to town. Medicham is a little bit lower maintenance, and now all I gotta do is start clicking buttons. Zygarde, I gotta be in a good position to click buttons, so I gotta make sure that Quagsire is not around, and I gotta make sure that Gliscor has a little bit less chip, or a little bit of chip. So it's an interesting scenario, and that Medicham can't really do as much unless there's more chip, but it has more coverage against everything overall. Zygarde does need a little bit of it has hold on. So there was immediate benefits to each. So Zygarde needs more setup, but does better. Medicham needs less setup, but is less efficient. So Medicham would probably be better if I got it out early in the game, and then Zygarde is probably a late game scenario. If Chansey is left, then I just immediately start setting up with DD and Coil and just go to town. Is the immediate thought process behind there. So it was really hard to come up with this, and the main reason that I did not choose Smeargle again for this matchup, despite how tempting it was, is there are a few levitators in the form of Gliscor, and I say levitators and things that don't touch the ground. So we have Gliscor, we have Mesprit, we have Xatu, and then things that just straight up don't care about web. On top of that, I do think there is a Magic Bouncer as well. My skill swap shenanigans, as cool as they were, are not going to work on this week if my opponent has seen that video. So it's the reason I want to leave that behind for a little bit. Slash maybe not even use it all against Magic Bouncers anymore. That was kind of a one and done thing, and the real only efficient thing it was going to do was be against that Sableye. But beyond that, I do think we'll see Smeargle again. It's just not going to happen so freshly after the shenanigans that happened last week. Komala was a very, very, very strong consideration for this game, but had it not been for Mega Mawile and for Chandelure, if those mons were not present, and I had a way to guarantee they weren't going to be present, I would have strongly considered a Z stockpile set. But given the fact that they are, it's really hard for Komala to bust through Mawile with just only return, and it's probably not going to happen. On top of that, if I run Earthquake as my mono attack instead, because that set runs Bulk Up, Wish, Stockpile, and one attack with the Normalium Z, so that way you can just get its stockpiles up, and then it heals fully. Which is the idea there. It's really cool because it also can't get status, which is a pretty big thing on my opponent's team. Toxic on potentially Gliscor, Toxic potentially on Umbreon, Toxic potentially on Mesprit, on Xatu. Xatu could have that or T-Wave. Quagsire usually has Toxic or Scald. Chansey usually has T-Wave or Toxic. Chandelure, bit rogue, but it can carry Wisp. There's a lot of status potential for my opponent, and it is something I do have to be careful about, which is why I looked at the little guy and I was like, you know what? I can't do it. I can't do it. He offers a lot defensively in form of status immunity, but I also have Mons on this team that just don't really care about status too much. Zapdos being immune to T-Wave. These two not necessarily caring about Burn that much. And then I have a few toxic immunities in the form of Gengar and Ferrothorn. So I think I'm going to be okay if I spread that out to different Mons, and then Komala's just going to have to sit on the bench for now. Starmie, the main reason I did not bring it is it does not hit hard enough to actually be able to be of benefit, especially because of the Chansey being there. If Chansey wasn't there, then this thing would have a lot more merit to actually bring, but it just doesn't work out that way, so that's why I didn't bring it. On top, because let me see, you get Ice Beam for Gliscor, you get Scald for Victini, you get Thunderbolt for Primarina, you get Signal Beam, as I was running on this, for this, as well as Mesprit, and then, to an extent, maybe Xatu as well. Jolteon doesn't have any immediate problems there, but I wouldn't really use it on it. Mesprit, you get Signal Beam, Xatu, you get T-Bolt or Ice Beam. Quagsire, if I really wanted to, I could run Grass Knot. I originally had Giga Drain on Gengar for Quagsire, but I ended up switching it out to Will-O-Wisp. I figured that would be a little bit more useful. Since if the Quagsire does happen to be physically oriented with, Scald and Earthquake, as opposed to, just mono-attacking Scald, Earthquake would do less, and I would be able to set up with Zygarde or something else. But the other thing we have going on there is that I guess the main thing I want to talk about is Starmie has the coverage, but it doesn't have the stopping power, because these things are fat, and I need an answer to them. Primeape was a consideration for a really long time as well, but it just so happens that there are things on my opponent's team that have the potential to just straight up be faster, which is, you know, I'm looking at Scarf Victini, potentially. I've seen Scarf Primarina before. It's a little weird, but it happens. Scarf Mesprit is also a pretty popular choice. Zatu, I think naturally ties. And then Chandelure is a pretty popular candidate for Scarf, and then Lightbird also is just naturally faster in general. So Primeape offering a lot of the coverage, not necessarily what I want here. And then Charizard was left behind kind of for the same reasons as Chansey. Not as Chansey, as Starmie. Which the main reason for it is Chansey, so I don't really like that being a possibility there. So these guys unfortunately going to be bench warmers. I think sub Baton Pass Zapdos is just really going to catch somebody on a loop, and passing to Medicham or either Zygarde will hopefully get some early momentum. Sylveon's going to be here to kind of stop and disrupt a little bit more. Gengar will hopefully cripple something, and if I can burn Mawile, that'll be, you know, kind of the business there. Other than that, Shadow Ball and Sludge Bomb, very reliable attacks. Just have to be careful when I go for him. I'll probably just start throwing out Shadow Balls just to coax Chansey in, because if I throw out a Sludge Bomb and Mawile switches in, then I'm in a world of hurt. If you throw out a Shadow Ball and then a Chansey switches into it, it's like, oh, well, shit, whatever. And then if Umbreon comes in too, well, even better. I can just go to fucking Zapdos, I bet. I can just go to Zapdos and set up is probably my main idea there. So ultimately, not too worried about that. Ferrothorn's going to be there, just, you know, as a hard stop to my opponent's special offense, as well as if I'm able to get the rocks up, that will be great. Not immediately counting on it, but if I find an opportunity, that is a huge plus. And then, you know, Medicham and Zygarde, these three Mons on the left side over here are probably going to be working very closely in tandem with each other. And then the other three are mainly just there for utility / support, chip for the other three guys. So this is the first time I've actually had to go in, not with balance, but with the strategy. And if the strategy fails, I don't really know if I have a solid answer. I feel like it's kind of okay. Outside of draft, it's really weird to do this. It's not a thing, but that's kind of what I like about draft. It forces you to think about new stuff, look at your opponent's team, and prep accordingly. And the fact that I play these guys, I think, 2 more times after this means that I'm going to have to freshen it up 2 more times to kind of see what we're doing after that. So in the meantime, I think that's going to do it for this locker room video. I hope you guys enjoyed my breakdown of what I plan on bringing for Week 3. And if you did, you can leave a like rating, you know, all that stuff. I do live stream the games. It's going to be on my Twitch, which is going to be in the description. But by the time you're seeing this, I will have probably live streamed it. And I will continue to eventually do so. I think except for Week 5. Week 5 is kind of up in the air because I go on vacation that week. And I'm going out of state. So I don't know if I'm going to have the equipment to record or do anything like that out there. Since I work on a rig, I don't work on a laptop. So it's just kind of, I'm going to kind of wing that week. But for now, I got all the relevant stuff in the description. You guys know how that goes. And I'll see you guys on the next one.